Institute. Peter Schweitzer's back with us. Greg, I think this was really revealing. You, I, Sarah, others have all talked about these 19, he's saying 20 pages that have been redacted as it relates to the FISA memo. That obviously is very important. And then he says, yeah, they want to stall at the FBI and DOJ. They want Republicans to lose. And he's saying there will be interviews and depositions and witnesses. This is not going away, which is important.
Right. These are 20 critical redacted pages in the FISA documents that need to be declassified, as well as the Gang of 8 documents related to FISA abuse. And I think once the American public casts their eyes on these documents, it will be very revealing of the Russia hoax, the title of my book. Rosenstein and the Department of Justice repeatedly define lawful subpoenas about not just FISA abuse, but the origins of the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. Rosenstein treats Congress with contempt. He should be held in contempt. This is a guy who's been covering up and obstructing justice.
What's your take, Peter Schweitzer? We haven't had you on a lot about this, and I know there's still the surveillance, unmasking, and leaking raw intelligence scandal. You're the one that broke open the Uranium One scandal. All the talk about that. The Clintons made millions and literally handed over 20% of our uranium to Putin and Russia. Another bigger scandal ignored by the media. I mean, you've got to be sitting back in fascination. Paul Manafort's going on trial tomorrow for a 2005 tax case that had nothing to do with Russia, and here the Clintons get off scot-free every time.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to watch all of it, Sean. It was said once that, politics is like comedy. Timing is everything. And when you look at the timing, the pattern of events in the Russia investigation, in the collusion investigation, now with the DOJ resistance on providing the American people with access to the FISA warrant, you see that timing supports the case that these are political actions by leadership. And, Greg, in his book, does a fantastic job of laying out the timeline in a sense that makes sense. I mean, let's keep in mind, the DOJ and FISA got the FISA warrant back in 2016. It was February of 2018 when Congressman Nunes released the heavily redacted memo that revealed Fusion GPS was behind the Steele dossier. And here we are, basically, end of July, early August, and they continue to drag their feet. Congress is performing its role on oversight, which is what it's supposed to do, and the executive branch is not immune to oversight. And we're at the situation now with Rod Rosenstein and impeachment because he's essentially put us in this situation by dragging his feet and not sharing this material with Congress, which has legitimate oversight responsibility.
Yeah, and we're not getting, it seems like we're not getting there. I cannot believe, let's use the Manafort standard here, Greg Jarrett, and I keep talking about the dangers to our Constitution and Fourth Amendment protection rights and illegal spying on American citizens, which we know took place, and, unmasking and all of this. And then Hillary gets away with violating the Espionage Act, the biggest obstruction case we've ever seen. We have high-level officials in the DOJ and FBI putting a fix in and rigging her investigation. Then, of course, she gets to go out, funnel money through a law firm, hire a foreign national, get Russian debunked lies, and pass it through a FISA court, not telling them who paid for it, not telling them they didn't verify it, then having officials, it's in your book, that people like Brennan were literally disseminating that false information as a CIA director politically to damage Trump and to influence an election.
Well, the dossier itself, which is laughable and phony on its face, the FBI knew this, but they didn't care. They exploited it as a pretext for the investigation and to wiretap the Trump campaign. But when they did that, they were concealing from the FISA court vital evidence and deceiving the judges. That's a fraud on the court. It's a felony called abuse of power. And as we now know, having seen the most recent version of the FISA application, the dossier was the bulk of the warrant application, exactly as Andrew McCabe told Congress behind closed doors. And yet the FBI and the DOJ never informed the court that this was paid for by the Clinton campaign and the Democrats, they are required by FBI regulations to first verify any evidence they present to the court. They did not do that by Comey's own admission.
You know, I'm just listening to both of you, and you're both very smart people, and you both have literally opened people's eyes to the level of corruption. You know, Peter, I just can't imagine that they can get away with all of this, but the number one question I'm being asked, or statement I'm being told, is, the Clintons get away with everything. They're going to you watch, they're going to skate. They're going to get away with this. And, you know, I'm beginning to wonder if they're not wrong.
Look, I think that in Washington, you have this entrenched network of incumbents, people that have been in political power for decades, some Democrats, some Republicans. They operate as what I call the permanent political class, and they protect each other. And what you're seeing in November 2016 with the election of Donald Trump, you saw it within the Democratic Party with the rise of Bernie Sanders. You see it with the Freedom Caucus. You see it with people on the left of the Democratic Party who are tired of that kind of caste, that kind of political caste running things in Washington, D.C. And the double standards are blatant. Look at the Paul Manafort case. I carry no water for Paul Manafort, and I think that any laws that he violated, he ought to be charged with. But here's the problem. He is being charged with, among other things, violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, which was created in the 1930s. If you are being hired by a foreign government or a foreign government entity to interact with U.S. government officials, you file a FARA report. And Paul Manafort didn't do that, so he's being charged. Well, somebody who also didn't do that was Tony Podesta, who lobbied on behalf of Russian interests. And he went, after the Manafort investigation started, Sean, in April of 2017, he said, oops, I forgot to file FARA reports. So he filed late reports. In August of 2017, he went back and did several other filings, including 6 of his employees that had dozens of meetings with government officials on behalf of Russian clients. So, my question is, yes, Paul Manafort ought to be investigated, but so should Tony Podesta, and yet he's not. And it's that double standard that I think has led people to be so angry and frustrated in Washington, D.C. And until that double standard is dealt with, the level of anger, I think, is only going to increase, and rightfully so.
So what is it at this point, do you think, Greg, that's holding the president under Article 2? He has the ability to demand that this information be handed over. I assume there's some reason why his attorneys don't want him to do that. What would they be?
Well, I suspect that Don McGahn, his White House counsel, is misleading the president. And I can't account for that. But sunshine is the best disinfectant, and I think that this material needs to be immediately declassified. Obviously, you don't want to jeopardize methods and sources, but every time the DOJ redacts something and then is forced to unredact, we find out they're not protecting sources and methods. They just made up the classified status of it to hide wrongdoing. And so I think the president needs to stop listening to Don McGahn, probably needs to replace Don McGahn, and get somebody in there who sees the bigger picture and is interested in fairness and justice.
Do you know what's in those 19 pages that are so damning? Because I keep hearing those 20 pages, 19 pages are devastating.
I don't. I have a source who knows the contents of them, tells me that they are absolutely critical and would essentially exonerate Trump and implicate the investigators, but he won't reveal the contents of them, and I understand that perfectly.
All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll come back more with Greg Jarrett, who's on his book tour now and is the #1 book in the country. Peter Schweitzer, of course, his book was #1 as well. All right, as we continue, final thoughts with Peter Schweitzer, author of Secret Empires, How the American Political Class Hides Corruption and Enriches Family and Friends. Greg Jarrett, #1 book in the country right now, just released, The Russian Hoax, The Illicit Scheme to Clear Hillary Clinton and Frame Donald Trump. We have the book, by the way, on Hannity.com. It's in bookstores all around the country. What is the next step here? Rudy Giuliani saying today, collusion is not a crime. They don't have a bleepity thing.
Well, I spend quite a bit of time in the book explaining how collusion in a political campaign with a foreign nation is not a crime. It's legal for foreign nationals to volunteer their services. What is a crime, however, is to pay somebody, as Hillary Clinton did, a foreign national, for information from Russians to target Donald Trump. And it's also a crime for the FBI and the Department of Justice to use that and to lie to a court for a wiretap. So it's all reversed here. But in the end, I think the information will come out.
What's your final word, Peter Schweitzer?
Well, I think Greg is right. Look, collusion is a sordid part of American history. All you have to do is go look at Anatoly Dobrynyn's memoirs. He was a Soviet ambassador for 30 years during the Cold War, and he recounts American politicians from Jimmy Carter to Tip O'Neill talking to him in the 1980s about how they should work together to undermine Ronald Reagan's presidential campaigns. So this is a sordid part of America's past. I'm sure that there are elements of it that continue to this day, but the bottom line is there's been no evidence presented of any collusion that's occurred. And I think that what we have to do, and I really applaud Greg for this in his book, we really have to not see the Clinton investigation and the Trump collusion investigation as separate things, as two separate baskets. One of the strengths, I think, of his book is the fact that he shows the timing of how critical decisions are being made in one, and then on the same day or in close proximity, a critical decision is being made on the other. And those decisions always seem to favor Hillary Clinton and always seem to be to the detriment of the Trump campaign. And that means we need transparency. That's the next step, and we've got to continue to push for that, period.
All right, guys, thank you for being with us. Peter Schweitzer, Greg Jarrett.